Hey guys, Justin here from Nintendo Watcher, back again with another video. This week, we're talking about the most expensive NES games you can buy right now. Retro gaming is more popular than ever before, and that's making it pretty tough to get your hands on some of these games. During the pandemic, we saw retro prices start to soar, and the media started picking up on these unbelievable stories about games selling for just absolutely absurd prices. The big headline that got everyone's attention was the sealed WATA certified copy of Super Mario 64 selling for $1.56 million in 2021. $1.56 million. But even years before that, retro game prices were starting to creep up. For some games, the prices really started to tick up around 2012. So with physical copies of retro games higher than I've ever seen them before, I started wondering, what are the 10 most expensive NES cartridges you can buy today? And the big question, are any of them worth the asking price? So I did some research. Using pricecharting.com, I came up with this list of the 10 most expensive NES cartridges you can buy right now. I wanted to think about only licensed games that were widely available. So these are the games that if you were a gamer in the late 80s or early 90s, you may have had these in your collection. So that means I'm not including variations of games like the 5-screw Mike Tyson's Punch-Out or unlicensed games like Peekaboo Poker. I'm also intentionally not including stadium events, since it was recalled pretty quickly and later republished as World Class Track Meet, a game that people basically pay you to take off their hands these days. Couple more things. For this video, I'm only looking at loose games, so no complete inbox prices. That's a totally different list. And because these prices change all the time, by the time you watch this, the prices could be totally different. Okay, those are the ground rules. Let's get started. Here are the 10 most expensive NES cartridges you can buy today.
Number 10, Gun-Nac, $418.50. Developed by Compile and released in North America in 1991, Gun-Nac is a fun vertical shooter for the NES. And that's one of the really interesting things about this game. The NES was known for its side-scrolling platformers, not its library of shooters. There were only a handful of vertical shooters on the NES, and for me, Gun-Nac is an all-time classic. It's right up there with 1942. The game has 5 different main weapons and 4 types of secondary bombs, and you're constantly picking up new upgrades for your weapon and causing just absolute chaos. Gun-Nac isn't exactly a tough shooter. It's actually a pretty good intro for people who are new to the genre. Number 9, Bubble Bobble, Part 2, $435. Developed by ITL and published by Taito in 1993, Bubble Bobble Part 2 is obviously the sequel to the much-loved Bubble Bobble. The game is largely the same as the original from 1986. You trap enemies in bubbles, and then you go pop them. While Bubble Bobble Part 2 doesn't offer much more in the gameplay department, it looks so much better than the first game. The graphics here are really beautiful, and there are 80 different levels, so there's tons of gameplay here. Bubble Bobble is an all-time great puzzle game on the NES, and if you missed Part 2 back in 1993, it's definitely worth playing. If you're interested in getting a physical copy, but you don't want to shell out almost $500, you can find the original Bubble Bobble for around $20. Number 8, Zombie Nation, $509.91. Developed by Kai Z and released in 1991, Zombie Nation is a side-scrolling shooter that puts you in control of a disembodied head. The story is pretty nuts. A meteorite lands in the Nevada desert in 1999, but turns out it wasn't a meteorite at all. It was an alien called Dark Seed, and the alien's turning Americans into zombies. Dark Seed has even transformed the Statue of Liberty into a living being to do its bidding. Oh, and it's taken possession of a deadly weapon, the legendary samurai sword. Anyway, the disembodied samurai head comes to the United States to save Americans from the zombie apocalypse. The first time I played this game, I thought the floating head was the Dark Seed. I mean, you're destroying buildings, you're killing people. That sounds pretty evil to me. Well, turns out The head is actually the samurai's head, so you're the good guy. And you're doing the right thing by destroying buildings and killing people and shooting your eyeballs and vomiting on people. Yeah, that's right. You don't use bullets here. It's eyeballs and vomit. There are 4 stages. You can start with any one of them. It's Mega Man style. And once you clear the 4 stages, you face the final boss, the Dark Seed. A few years ago, Zombie Nation was released for the Nintendo Switch. So, if you don't want to pay $500 to play it, you can pick it up for a few dollars on the eShop. Number 7, Dragon Fighter, $524.99. Developed by Natsumi and published by Soulful for the NES back in 1992, Dragon Fighter is a side-scroller set in a fantasy world that's threatened by an evil warlock and his army of monsters. Stop me if you've heard this one before. And holy shit, this game is hard. And what's going on with this sprite? Am I a Renaissance painter or something? And what's going on with these enemies? I'm getting attacked by bears and sentient snowflakes. Honestly, I don't have much to say about Dragon Fighter because I can't get past the first stage. I'm immediately surrounded by enemies and my little sword attack only does so much. Listen, I know, I fully admit this is probably a get good situation, but I'm not good. I'm not good at all. Okay, moving on. Number 6, Kid Klown and Nightmare World, $632.22. Developed and published by Kemco, Kid Klown Nightmare World is one of the most unintentionally creepy NES games I've ever seen. Just look at this box art. Anyway, you play as a clown named, appropriately, Kid Klown. It's a rainy day in Kansas, of all places, and Kid Klown and his parents run into the evil Nightmare. This is like Bruce Wayne style. The Nightmare, get it, asks Kid Klown to open a treasure vault. He refuses, and then the Nightmare kidnaps his parents. Kid Klown has to follow the Nightmare into his nightmare world to save his family. Listen, the gameplay is interesting. Kid Klown attacks with balloons, and you can also bounce on those same balloons to get your jumps even higher. You know, it's an interesting, unique concept. I like it a lot. I'm not exactly sure the history behind this game, but in Japan, it was originally a Mickey Mouse game. It probably had something to do with licensing, but you have to imagine that the same game starring Mickey Mouse would have sold so much better in North America. If you've got the details on this game, let me know in the comments. Number 5, Bonk's Adventure, $814.51. Red Company and Atlas, yep, that Atlas, originally developed Bonk's Adventure for the TurboGrafx-16 in 1990. It was later ported to the NES and was released in North America in 1994, making it one of the last games for the system. Bonk's Adventure is yet another side-scrolling platformer, but instead of jumping on enemies like you typically do, Bonk headbutts them. I mean, why would you stomp on enemies when you have a forehead like this? The game has super colorful graphics and it's known for its quirky sense of humor, but honestly, it's just not for me. I know. Some of y'all love Bonk's Adventure and I totally respect that, but this is just a game that's never clicked for me. I'm probably missing out on a really awesome game, aren't I? Despite me not liking it, Bonk's Adventure is one of the most highly sought after games on the NES, and the price tag is absolutely astonishing, at least for the NES. But you can grab the TurboGrafx-16 version of the game for around $50. Number 4, Panic Restaurant, $905.50. Developed by EIM and published by Taito, Panic Restaurant is an interesting platformer that puts you in control of a chef named Cookie. Cookie's restaurant has been cursed by a rival chef, O'Dove. You have to fight through the entire restaurant. It consists of 6 levels, battling against various food-themed enemies. The levels are really inspired, and there's a ton of variety in these enemy designs. The sprites are huge and detailed, and it's really fun to explore the restaurant and see what challenges await you, including at one point, an evil microwave. As you move through the levels and defeat enemies, you collect coins, and at the end of the level, you gamble it all away on a slot machine. The slot machine has some nice power-ups though, so it's important to collect as many coins as you possibly can. It's easy to see why Panic Restaurant received such positive reviews when it was released back in 1992. Number 3, Power Blade 2, $937.89. Developed by Natsumi and published by Taito, Power Blade 2 is a side-scrolling game where you play as Nova, the same protagonist as the first Power Blade game. Anybody else getting super ripped Daniel Craig vibes from this cover? Anyway, this time around, Nova gets a mission from the US Department of Defense to destroy the Delta Foundation, an evil organization that's blackmailing the United States government or something. The game has a really cinematic opening for an NES game, and the setup sounds like it could have been the plot of a really awesome late 80s B-movie. But all of this is just an excuse for Nova to walk left to right and kick. Nova's primary weapon is a boomerang, and you can throw it in 8 directions, which is really cool for an NES game. Also, nothing says America like a boomerang to the face, am I right? Honestly, Power Blade 2 just doesn't do it for me. The controls don't feel great, especially the sliding, which is absolutely necessary to complete these levels. Power Blade 2 was one of those late NES games. It was released in 1992, and I think that contributes to the price tag. But if you're interested in Power Blade and you just want to own one of these games, the first game is only like $20. So rather than spending a small fortune on Power Blade 2, just go pick up Power Blade 1. Number 2, The Flintstones. Surprise at Dinosaur Peak. $1,461.02. Developed by Taito, The Flintstones Surprise at Dinosaur Peak is another licensed side-scrolling platformer on a console that was absolutely full of them. But Surprise at Dinosaur Peak is really fun. By the early 90s, the Flintstones were having a bit of a resurgence, and Taito was riding that wave. Surprise at Dinosaur Peak is the second Flintstones game for the NES, and it looks and it plays a lot like the first game. In fact, many of the original sprites and animations are totally reused here. But unlike the first game, Surprise at Dinosaur Peak lets you switch between controlling Fred and Barney to solve puzzles and take on enemies. Fred has a powerful club attack and can grab on the ledges. Barney has a slingshot and can attack enemies from a distance. Now, Surprise at Dinosaur Peak is a serious challenge, especially in that final stage. As I was playing through to capture this footage, I wanted to pull my hair out. At the time of release, the game was received fairly well, but by 1994, it was so late in the NES's life, most players had moved on to the Super Nintendo, home to yet another Flintstones game, The Treasure of Sierra Madrock, which was also released in 1994. It was a lot of Flintstones at the same time, and Surprise at Dinosaur Peak just didn't sell a lot, so there aren't many copies floating out there. I also covered Surprise at Dinosaur Peak in my last days of the NES video. Number 1, Little Samson, $2,314.62. If anyone keeps up with NES prices, this number 1 game comes as no surprise to you. Developed by Takaru, a studio created by a few ex-Capcom employees, Little Samson is a side-scrolling action game where you control 4 different characters with completely different abilities, and you take on an evil sorcerer who's attempting to spread his black magic across the land. 4 characters are Samson, a versatile character who can climb up walls and cling to ceilings. Kikara, a fire-breathing dragon that can fly. KO, a tiny rodent that lays bombs that can also climb to walls and hang onto ceilings. And Gam, a rock warrior who is an absolute tank. He's slow, but he's strong, and he can walk straight across spikes without a problem. Unlike games like Super Mario 2, where you choose a character at the beginning of the level, Little Samson lets you change characters on the fly. In fact, it requires you to. You won't make it past these levels without switching out characters. Each character has its own unique strengths and weaknesses, and you have to learn how to use each of them to complete the stages. For the time, and even now, Little Samson's graphics and music are really impressive. Unfortunately, Little Samson was released in 1992, again pretty late in the NES's life, and it didn't get much promotion in North America, leading to pretty poor sales. Little Samson's awesome gameplay, combined with its poor sales, makes it easy to see why it became such a collector's item.
And that's the list. So, are any of these games worth the price? For many collectors, maybe even you, the answer is yeah. It's owning a piece of your history. It's like a physical piece of nostalgia. But for me, no way. Some of these are great games, for sure. But there's just no way that they should cost what they cost. And it's really a shame that the rarity of these games has pushed the prices so high, just making them absolutely inaccessible for new players. And a lot of these never got re-releases on modern consoles. But you know, there are games like this for every single console. It made me wonder, like, in a few years, which Switch games are going to be crazy expensive. Anyway, did you own any of these NES games back in the day? Let me know in the comments. If you like this video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. It's totally free and it really helps our channel grow. As always, thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing.